So, picture this, a book written on death row, 1,500 years ago, that tackles some of the biggest questions we still ask today about happiness, about fate. This book became an absolute cornerstone of Western thought for 1,000 years. Today, we're going to dive into the Consolation of Philosophy. Now, those words you just saw, they come from a man named Anicius Manulus Severinus Boethius. Quite a mouthful, right? Let's just call him Boethius. This was a guy who had absolutely everything, and then lost it all. He's writing this from a prison cell, stripped of his wealth, his power, his reputation, just waiting for a brutal execution. And it's here that he has this stark realization of just how fragile his so-called happiness really was. So, you've got to be asking, how did he end up here? Well, before that prison cell, Boethius was one of the most powerful men in the entire Roman world. Seriously. He was a brilliant philosopher, a trusted advisor to a king. I mean, he was at the absolute peak of his game. Okay, so check out this timeline. Boethius is born into this noble family, and by the time he's 30, he's a consul. Then he becomes a top advisor to the king. Talk about a meteoric rise, right? But then, look how fast it all falls apart. In just a couple of years, it all comes crashing down. He goes from the pinnacle of power straight to a death sentence. It's just staggering. So, what was the charge? Treason. You see, the king at the time, Theodoric, was getting really suspicious of the old Roman aristocracy. And when Boethius stood up to defend the Senate against what he thought were totally unjust accusations, well, he basically painted a giant target on his own back. And just like that, he was arrested, condemned without even getting a trial, and thrown in prison to await his death. Okay, so let's picture him. He's in his cell, totally drowning in self-pity, scribbling these sad poems, when all of a sudden, he's not alone anymore. He gets a visitor, but it's definitely not who he was expecting. This visitor is, well, she's an incredible woman. Her height seems to shift, like one moment she's normal-sized, and the next she's piercing the sky. Her dress is embroidered with these two Greek letters, pi and theta, which stand for practical and theoretical philosophy. But get this, her dress is torn. And she says it's because marauders have been ripping off little pieces of her wisdom for themselves. Pretty powerful imagery, huh? And her first words? Whoa. She sees the muses of poetry hanging around Boethius' bedside, inspiring his sad little poems, and she just lays into them. She calls them hysterical sluts and says they're feeding him sweetened poisons. Then she kicks them out. She is not messing around. She's here to provide the real cure. And this visitor, as you've probably guessed, is Lady Philosophy herself. And her first order of business? To completely tear down and rebuild how Boethius is seeing his own misery. She basically tells him, hey, you're crying over losing things that were never really yours to begin with. She gets right to the heart of it with this one simple but huge question. Now, Boethius thinks he's got the answer all figured out, but oh boy, Lady Philosophy is about to show him that he's got it all completely wrong. And listen, Boethius is just like most of us, right? He thought happiness was found in stuff like this: wealth, a high-status job, power, fame, pleasure, and he'd had it all. But Lady Philosophy, she just shoots them all down, one by one. She calls them false paths. Why? Because they're all external gifts, and the hard truth is, anything that can be given to you can also be taken away. So then she introduces him to the real source of his problems. This character she calls Fortune. And Fortune isn't your friend or your enemy. She's more like a force of nature. Her entire essence is change. As she says, she's always turning her wheel, bringing the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. It's a game to her, and to expect that wheel to just stop for you, that's to completely misunderstand how the world works. So here's the crucial point she's making. If you pin all your happiness on things that Fortune can control, your money, your job, your reputation, you are absolutely setting yourself up for misery. True happiness, philosophy argues, has to come from within. It has to be something that nobody, not even Fortune, can take away from you no matter what's happening in the outside world. Okay, so Boethius is starting to get it, but then he hits her with another agonizing question, and it's one we all ask, right? Okay, fine, but why do bad things happen to good people? Why do the wicked seem to get away with everything while good people like me suffer? It just feels so unjust. And her answer here is just mind-bending. She completely turns his worldview upside down. You can see it in this comparison. Boethius says the wicked flourish. She says, no, the wicked are actually weak. He says evil goes unpunished. She says wickedness is its own punishment. He says criminals get what they want. She says evil is literally nothing because God, who can do anything, can't do evil. It's a total reversal.
So how does she get there? Well, her logic goes something like this. All beings, by their very nature, seek out what is good. So people who choose to do evil things are actually acting against their own human nature. They become so corrupted that in a way they stop being fully human. So their punishment isn't something that happens to them, like going to jail. Their punishment is the internal rot, the degradation of their very soul.
And all of this builds to the book's absolute intellectual peak. This is where Boethius hits her with the ultimate paradox, a question philosophers have wrestled with for centuries. If there's an all-knowing God, how can any of us really have free will?
I mean, think about it. The logic seems pretty solid, right? If God already knows you're going to choose pizza over tacos for dinner tonight, was it ever really a free choice? It kind of feels like it was predetermined. And if that's true, then what's the point of reward or punishment? Our entire sense of freedom could just be a big illusion.
Okay, so philosophy's solution is brilliant, and it starts with this key idea: not all knowing is the same. There's a hierarchy. At the bottom, you've got sensation, like how an animal perceives the world. Then there's imagination. Above that is human reason, which lets us grasp universal concepts. But at the very top is intelligence, a divine way of knowing that belongs to God, and it sees reality in a way we just can't.
And to really get what she's saying about God's knowledge, we have to completely rethink our concept of time. She gives this famous definition of eternity. For God, eternity isn't just time stretching on forever and ever. No, it's something else entirely. It's the complete, simultaneous, and perfect possession of everlasting life. It's an all-at-once existence completely outside of our timeline. So boom, here's the resolution. God doesn't foresee the future, because from his perspective, there's no future to see. He's outside of our timeline. He sees everything, past, present, and future, all at once, in a single eternal moment. So he isn't predicting what you'll do. He's simply watching you do it, freely, in his eternal now. Think of it this way. You watching a video of a horse race doesn't cause a certain horse to win. You're just observing it. Same idea. Now, the tragic part of this story is that Boethius was executed shortly after writing all this down. He had no idea if anyone would ever even read his words. And yet, this philosophical last testament, written in the absolute darkest of circumstances, would go on to change the world. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that for the next 1,000 years, this was the book to read. Seriously, huge names like Dante and Chaucer and just countless other thinkers, they all read it, translated it, and were deeply, profoundly influenced by its ideas on fortune, evil, and free will. It basically acted as a bridge, carrying all this amazing classical philosophy straight into the medieval world. So what's the final message here? What are we supposed to take away from all this? Well, if God is just an eternal witness and not some cosmic puppet master, then our free will is very, very real. But that doesn't let us off the hook. In fact, it puts a huge responsibility on our shoulders. It means we have to choose to be good because we're always living in the sight of a judge who sees everything. And so, this 1,500-year-old text leaves us with a challenge that feels just as relevant today. It tells us that we live in the sight of a judge who sees all things. So the question it throws back at us is this: what fortune are you going to shape for yourself?